The rain had been falling steadily for hours, a gentle, rhythmic patter against the roof and windows of the old farmhouse. For most, the sound was soothing, comforting, even. But for Maya, it had come to mean something else entirely. She had moved into the house just 2 weeks ago, looking for solitude after a messy breakup and a career that had left her emotionally drained. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town, the house had charm, creaking floorboards, antique fixtures, and a wide porch that overlooked a dense, whispering forest. The locals had warned her about the house, but their smiles had been forced and nervous, as if they were saying more with their silence than their words. She brushed it off as superstition. The first night it rained, Maya found herself wide awake at not because of a noise, but because of the lack of one. The rain, which had been steady all night, suddenly stopped as if someone had pressed pause on nature itself. Then she heard it. A faint scraping sound. It was loud, just enough to raise goosebumps on her arms. It came from the hallway outside her bedroom, slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragged along the wood-paneled wall. She held her breath, heart pounding, straining to listen. After a moment, it stopped. And as suddenly as it had ceased, the rain returned, masking everything again. The next morning, she found long, thin scratches along the hallway wall. She convinced herself it was just old wood shifting, maybe a branch brushing against the side of the house. But that night it happened again, and again at exactly the third night. She stayed up, lights off, rain falling steadily. She sat in bed with her flashlight clutched in her hand, her ears tuned to every creak and groan of the old home. When the rain stopped in the dark, her breath hitched. The scraping started again. But this time, there was something else with it. Breathing. What? Shallow breathing, as though someone or something was standing just outside her door. The doorbell rattled. Maya flicked on the flashlight and pointed it toward the door, but there was nothing there. She forced herself to get up, every nerve screaming. When she opened the door, the hallway was empty. But the scratches were back, this time deeper, more erratic. Something was trying to get into her room. She called the police the next morning. They searched the house and surrounding woods, but found no sign of forced entry. No footprints in the muddy ground. No evidence anyone else had been near. But the sheriff didn't look her in the eye as he left. He simply said, "You should think about leaving before it gets worse." That night, she set up her phone to record. She placed it in the hallway pointing toward her door, and left it running as she went to bed. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. The rhythm became a lullaby, and despite her fear, she eventually drifted into a restless sleep. She woke up to sunlight and immediately grabbed her phone. The recording was still going, 6 hours of audio and video. She fast-forwarded to the hour mark. Then, the rain stopped. The hallway darkened slightly in the grainy night vision of the phone. Then movement. A tall, impossibly thin figure crept into view. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes wide and hollow. Its limbs moved unnaturally, almost insect-like, as it leaned toward her door and pressed its face against the wood. It opened its mouth. What came out was not a scream, but a low, guttural moan that distorted the audio like a warping tape. And it dragged a long, yellowed nail along the wall, slowly, leaving deep gouges. It buzzed, turned, and looked directly into the camera. The screen went black. She never saw what happened next, because the file became corrupted. The audio cut to a screech, and the footage scrambled into static. The only thing that remained was a single frame of the creature's face, its gaping mouth frozen open, eyes boneless, as if staring through the lens and into whoever dared to watch it. That day Maya packed her bags. She did bother selling the house. She laughed at all behind clothes, furniture, memories. But the worst part wasn't the creature. It was the rain. Because now every time she hears it in her car windshield, on the roof of her new apartment, even in recordings, it always stops it. And when it does, she hears that sound again. The slow, deliberate scraping. "Oh, sir. Oh, sir." And she knows, it followed her. May had always found comfort in silence. The hum of the city, the constant blare of horns, and the overwhelming buzz of people moving like ants through their daily routines had become suffocating. After her 10-year relationship fell apart in a matter of weeks, and the high-stress marketing job she'd given her life to push her past the brink of exhaustion, she realized something had to change. There was no dramatic epiphany, no tearful breakdown, just a quiet moment on her apartment balcony one rainy afternoon, watching droplets slide down the glass, when she thought, "I need to leave." She had spent a week looking at listings online before one in particular caught her attention. A two-story farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by woods and fields, almost isolated. It was all built in the early still boasting its original woodwork and wraparound porch. The photos showed sun-streaked floors, clawfoot tubs, and ivy-covered walls. Best of all, the price was shockingly low. Almost too low. She hesitated only briefly, just long enough to read a few vague, two-star reviews from previous renters. Beautiful place. But something's not right for a nice location. But the nights were hard to get through. No one elaborated. And honestly, Mai did care. She was superstitious. She didn't believe in ghosts or bad energy or any of that. She believed in fresh starts. So she packed up what little she still cared about, left the keys to her old apartment on the kitchen counter, and drove 6 hours until the city faded behind her and the fields opened up like a new page waiting to be written on. The town she arrived in was quiet and quaint. One main road, a diner, a grocery store, a gas station, and little else. The people were kind, but strangely reserved. They asked why she moved, where she came from, and smiled politely at her answers, but she noticed the looks they gave each other when she mentioned the farmhouse. There was a subtle shift in their expressions, a flicker of something unspoken that passed through their eyes. A tall man at the gas station, maybe in his 60s, said, "Ah, that old place, huh? Been empty a while. Hope you like the sound of rain," and chuckled, but it did feel like a joke. May brushed it all off. People in small towns talked. Maybe the house had a bad reputation, or maybe the locals just didn't like outsiders. Either way, she was here now. The farmhouse was even more beautiful in person. The trees that flanked the long driveway swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant forest gave off the earthy scent of pine and moss. The porch creaked under her boots as she stepped up to the heavy wooden front door and unlocked it for the first time. Inside, it smelled of old wood and time. Thus motes danced in the shafts of light that poured through the windows, and everything felt still, like the house had been holding its breath, waiting. She spent the first few days unpacking, cleaning, arranging the furniture just so. At night, she curled up with books and tea, and let the peaceful hush of the countryside wrap around her. The rain came often, soft and steady, tapping against the roof like a lullaby. It was the perfect white noise, calming her nerves and lulling her to sleep. It wasn't until the 5th night that she noticed the rain had a pattern. It always started late around p.m. and lasted until morning. But on that night, the first strange night, she woke abruptly around now. The rain had stopped so suddenly, it felt unnatural, like someone had muted the world. The silence was thick, pressing in on her chest. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, unsure why she felt afraid. There was no thunder, no wind. Just that oppressive quiet. She told herself it was nothing. A strange dream. A moment of insomnia. She did check the time the next night, but when she woke again to the same silence, she felt the chill in her spine. This time, she got up and went to the window. The trees outside were motionless. The moon peeked through thin clouds. Not a sound reached her ears. And then, just as suddenly, the rain returned. It began softly, like before, and picked up its usual rhythm. She climbed back into bed and tried to ignore the lingering sense that something wasn't right. It was during her next trip to the town grocery store that she decided to ask. She chatted with the young cashier, a girl with too much eyeliner and chipped black nail polish, and casually brought up how often it rained out where she lived. "Oh, here," the girl said, scanning cans. "The woods out there like it wet, I guess." Maya smiled awkwardly. "Have you ever been to that farmhouse? The one with the porch and the cashier stopped mid-scan. "You're staying there?" "Yes, why?" The girl didn't answer at first. She just resumed scanning, faster than before. Then she mumbled, "People say it listens to the rain." Maya laughed softly, assuming it was some kind of local folklore. "Well, I hope it's not too chatty," and trying to relax. But the girl did laugh with her. She didn't even look up. At night, Maya found herself unable to sleep. She lay in bed, covers up to her chin, listening to the rain fall against the windows. The pattern was the same, as steady, almost hypnotic. She began to drift off, eyes fluttering, when she felt something. It was the sound. It was a shift in the atmosphere, like the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. She glanced at her phone on the nightstand. The screen glowed to life. And the rain stopped. Not a gradual fade. Not a moment of light drizzle. 1 second it was falling again, the next, it was gone. as though the sky itself had shut its mouth. Miss sat up in bed again, heart hammering. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just a pattern of nature. Something was off. She listened, held her breath. The silence was so thick, she could hear her own pulse in her ears. Then a new sound broke through. Srep. It was faint, almost unnoticeable. A long, slow drag, like something hard and sharp moving across wood. It came from the hallway. Her hallway. She froze. Srep. Another sound. Oh, sir. She wanted to call out, to scream, to grab her phone and dial for help. But her body refused to move. Every muscle locked in fear. Her breath caught in her throat. And then, as if it had never stopped, the rain began again. Soft at first, then steady. The pressure in the room lifted, and the normal sounds of the night returned. Whatever had happened, whatever that was, had gone with the silence. She lay there the rest of the night, eyes wide open, waiting for the rain to stop again. But it didn't. The next morning, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a tree branch brushing against the wall. Maybe the house creaked at night and she'd imagined the rest. She even checked the hallway wall. That was when she saw the scratches. 3 long, deep gouges in the wood paneling, running from the floor halfway up the wall. Not new. Not old either. And they had been there the day before. After the night I heard the first strange scraping sound, she couldn't sleep the same way again. Something about it lingered in her mind like a song stuck on repeat, but this was the melody. It was something darker. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt like she was on the verge of hearing it again. And when she did fall asleep, her dreams were twisted echoes of that moment, shadows moving just beyond the doorway, long fingers trailing down the wall, the silence pressing down like a weight on her chest. Despite her efforts to rationalize everything, to tell herself it was just the old house settling, that maybe an animal had found its way inside the wall, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. Something was right. She began watching the clock more closely, especially at night. It became a compulsion. No matter how exhausted she felt, her eyes always snapped open just before and she would wait staring at the digital numbers on her phone glowing faintly on the nightstand. And every night, right on cue, the rain stopped. It did fade. It did slow. It just ceased, completely and unnaturally, as though the world itself held its breath. The silence that followed was peaceful, it was suffocating. So complete that she could hear every creak of the house, every rustle of her blanket, every nervous breath she took. The second time it happened, May remained in bed. Her pulse raced in her throat as her ears strained for any sound beyond her room. And then she heard it again, faint, deliberate, unmistakable. Srep. It started at the far end of the hallway. That same slow, dragging sound, like nails or claws being drawn across wood. Each second stretched out like an hour as the sound crept closer, moving at a chillingly slow pace. It would scrape, pause, scrape again, as if whatever was making it had no need to hurry. As if it knew exactly where she was. She stared at her bedroom door, expecting the handle to jiggle or the door to creak open, but nothing happened. The sound stopped right outside. For a moment, there was only silence again. Then, very faintly, she heard what sounded like breathing. Not soft or steady, but labored. Wet breathing, like lungs struggling to inhale air that did belong in them. May's body was frozen with fear. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to move, to hide, but she couldn't even twitch a finger. Her eyes were locked on the door, her body tied with dread, waiting for the inevitable. And just like that, the rain returned. A soft patter at first, then building to a steady rhythm. The pressure in the room eased. The breath she did realize she'd been holding release. The strange presence outside her door was gone. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning finally arrived, she bolted out of bed and flung the door open. The hallway was empty, just as she'd left it. But the air felt uncharged, like it had been disturbed. She looked down and saw it again. New marks. There were 3 thin, jagged scratches on the wooden floorboards just outside her room. They were fresh, deep enough to have removed the varnish and splintered the wood slightly. She knelt beside them, running her fingers over the grooves. No animal had done this. The lines were too straight, too intentional. Like someone or something had scraped them with claws. The thought made her stomach churn. Still, she did want to call anyone. What would she say? That a ghost was dragging its fingers across her floor every time the rain stopped. No one would believe her. And the last thing she needed was to be treated like she was unstable. So she told herself again and again it was her imagination. That the stress of her move, her past, and her desire for solitude had started to eat away at her mind. But that night it happened again. Just like clockwork. The rain began to fall around Beam, and lulled her into a false sense of comfort. She curled up under her blanket and closed her eyes, trying to pretend everything was normal. But no matter how tired she was, no matter how heavy her limbs felt, her eyes snapped open at me. Like an internal alarm clock had been hardwired into her brain. The rain stopped a minute later, and with the silence came the scraping. This time it started even closer. She didn't have to strain to hear it. It was just outside her door from the very beginning, slow, sharp drags along the wall, pacing back and forth, over and over, as if it were waiting for something. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold. The doorbell rattled. It was violent. It did jerk or turn. It simply shook slightly, like someone was gently testing it, making sure it was locked. Her breath caught in her throat. She could scream, couldn't move. She lay paralyzed in bed, staring at the knob, watching it twitch slightly back and forth in the dim light from her phone screen. The breathing began again. This time she could hear it more clearly, slow, irregular, thick with some kind of fluid. It did sound human. It lasted less than a minute, though it felt like hours. Then, suddenly, the sound of the rain returned, first as a tap, then a steady rhythm that seemed to push the fear back like a tide. It remained still for a long time. She did dare open the door. When she finally moved, it was only to pull the blanket over her face like a child hiding from a nightmare. But she knew it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. The morning after, she checked the door. More scratches, this time higher, near the knob. 3 of them. Same as the ones on the floor and the wall from before. And deliberate, as if etched by claws. They had been there before. They had been there the day she moved in. And each night after that, the same thing repeated. Always time. Always when the rain stopped. Always that same scraping sound. May began to dread the night. She stayed awake as long as she could, but no matter how much coffee she drank or how long she distracted herself, sleep always caught up to her, and then she was right back in that moment. That exact minute. That impossible silence. She considered leaving, packing her things, driving away, never looking back. But something held her in place. A strange mixture of fear, curiosity, and paralysis. It was as though the house was watching her, testing her, seeing how much she could endure. The scratches grew in number. They began appearing in places she had heard the noise from, in the walls of the living room, on the floor outside the bathroom, even on the window ledges. Like whatever haunted her at Ame was no longer confined to the hallway. Like it was beginning to explore. Or worse, it was hunting. The deeper Maya fell into the cycle of silence and rain, the more she noticed that the scratches weren't just random, they were evolving. What began as a few thin marks near her bedroom door had now spread throughout the house like a disease. Every morning she discovered more of them, on the floor near the staircase, along the door frames, even etched into the baseboards behind the furniture. They weren't accidental. Each sit came in 3 spiral, deliberate, almost ritualistic. It was as if something had left them there with purpose, not as an act of violence, but as a message. At first she tried to document them. She took photos each morning, creating a folder on her phone labeled evidence, though she still couldn't bring herself to tell anyone. What would she even say? That something invisible was scratching messages into her house in the dead of night, while the rain took a breath. No one would believe her. Not the police. Not the people in town who already looked at her like she did belong. But Maya noticed a pattern. The scratches always appeared after the silence, never before. Always around the time the rain stopped. And never while she was awake and alert. They only came when she was vulnerable, when her body betrayed her with sleep. It was like something waited for that exact moment. As if it knew. One morning, she found a set of scratches directly on her bedroom door, on the inside. That's when panic set in. Until then, the markings had been on exterior-facing surfaces, walls, doors, floors, anywhere something could touch from the outside. But this meant it had been inside while she was asleep. The idea made her sick. She had heard it enter. She had heard anything except the usual silence, the scrape, the breath. And now it had crossed the boundary of the door. The rain had become both her comfort and her curse. She welcomed its return each night, not because she enjoyed the sound anymore, but because she feared the moment it stopped. Every time the storm clouds gathered and the soft patter began on the roof, she would tense, knowing what waited on the other side of that stillness. And it was never late. Like clockwork, the rain would stop and the presence would return. One particularly cold night, She made the mistake of falling asleep early, lulled into a false sense of peace by the rhythmic rain. She awoke not to the sound of silence, but to a strange, almost muffled dragging coming from the attic. A new sound. A new location. It did match the usual scraping. It was heavier, slower, as if something large was moving across the floorboards above her. She lay still, her ears straining, heart racing. She had never gone into the attic. She hadn't even opened the hatch since moving in. But now something was clearly moving up there, pacing, dragging. Then silence. Not the thick, unnatural silence she'd grown used to, but a real silence, followed by a thump. And then the scratching started again directly above her. She stared at the ceiling, heart in her throat, and saw a faint line begin to form. It was like watching a knife drag through plaster in real time. A deep groove slowly appeared, long and purposeful, right over her bed. And another. And a third. 3 long gashes forming directly overhead. She bolted out of bed, stumbling backward into the hallway, clutching her phone like it could protect her. She didn't stop to think, didn't look back, just ran outside barefoot into the cold rain. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the driveway, her breath steaming in the night air, soaked to the bone. There she stood, staring at the house at the dark windows, the dim porch light flickering, the rain washing down its wooden sides, and realized something terrifying. The scratches weren't warnings. They were progress. Each night, the marks came closer. First the hallway, then the door, then the inside of her room. Now the attic above her bed. It was moving toward her deliberately, patiently, like it had all the time in the world. The rain began to ease. It lightened, tapping softer and softer until it stopped again. The world fell still. Maya's skin prickled as the silence swallowed everything. Even outside, even in the open air, she could feel it. Something watching. Something waiting. She took a deep breath, turned, and ran back inside, slamming the door and locking it. She did sleep that night. She sat in the corner of the living room with every light on, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ceiling like it might rip open at any second. She listened to the rain start again an hour later, but she did feel safe. The pattern had changed. The house was changing. The next morning, Maya forced herself to climb up into the attic. Thus choked the air as she pulled down the ladder and crept up slowly. The narrow beams groaned under her weight, and the single bulb overhead barely illuminated the space. Boxes of old belongings lined the walls, things left behind by previous tenants. She hadn't dared touch them before, but now she searched every corner, heart pounding. She found something near the center. An old wooden chest sat partially buried under a tarp. The floorboards around it were covered in deep scratch marks more violent than the ones downstairs, as though something had gone wild up there in the dark. She hesitated, then reached for the latch and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of journals, old and yellowed, written in a shaky hand. She picked one at random and opened it. "It comes when the rain stops," the first page read. "Always at. I don't know how long I can keep it out." The entries continued short, panicked scribbles documenting the exact experiences Maya had endured. Each night, more scratches, more movement, more signs that the thing, whatever it was getting closer. The last entry was dated almost 12 years ago. "It got inside. I saw its face in the dark. And not staying here another night." The rest of the pages were blank. Maya backed away from the chest, heart pounding louder than ever. She was the first. The markings weren't new. They had been growing with each resident. Maybe the thing did come for everyone. Maybe only for those who stayed long enough. But it always left a mark. The next night, she did sleep. She stayed in the living room again, surrounded by lights and noise. She played music, turned on the television, opened every curtain, but when the clock crept toward the rain stopped once more. And this time, there was no scraping. Just silence. The kind that felt like a mouth opening right behind you. Maya's sense of reality had begun to fray like an old rope stretched too thin. The nights had become battlegrounds, and sleep was no longer a refuge, it was a liability. Every time she allowed herself to drift off, something came closer. The rain had stopped being just weather. It had become a barrier. And when that barrier lifted, even for a minute, something slipped through. Something that wanted her attention, her fear, or something else she couldn't yet understand. The fourth night after discovering the attic journal was the first time she truly heard the breathing. Not muffled, not distant, but so close it felt like it was coming from her own lungs. She had made the mistake of dozing off around midnight, curled up on the living room couch with every light on. The soft glow of the lamps, the hum of the tip playing a run of a sitcom she was watching, it was the closest thing to normal she had laughed. But normal was a fragile illusion in the house. And it shattered again the moment her phone vibrated on the table, waking her with a jolt. She rubbed her eyes and checked the time. The rain had stopped. The world outside was soundless. The house, which usually creaked and groaned as it settled, seemed to hold its breath. The air was still, but heavier somehow, like it had thickened with tension. Then came the breath. It was deep and ragged, not like the rhythmic inhale and exhale of a sleeping person. It was wet, gurgling, and uneven. That sound like lungs full of fluid struggling to pull in air. It came from somewhere to her left, just behind the couch. May's eyes widened. She didn't move. Not even to breathe. She waited, heart hammering like a war drum in her chest, as the breathing drew closer. Every inhale seemed to shudder, as if the thing responsible had never learned how to breathe properly. It was unnatural, almost animalistic, and yet undeniably intelligent. It was a sound full of presence. Not instinctual like a beast, but intentional. It was there for her. A creak in the floorboard directly behind her made her skin crawl. She did turn. She couldn't. Fear had frozen her to the spot. Her fingers twitched with the need to reach for her phone again, to do something, but she was terrified that even the smallest movement would provoke it. The breathing shifted. It was right above her now, standing behind the couch. She could feel the weight of it in the air, like a shadow pressing down on her. Her eyes welled with tears, not from sadness or panic but from sheer, helpless terror. It was the kind of fear that lived in the marrow of your bones, the ancient kind that told you you were prey. The sound of the doorknob turning snapped her out of the paralysis. She didn't know how she moved so fast. One moment she was frozen, and the next she had bolted from the couch and was running for the front door. The lights flickered overhead as she passed under them. She flung the door open without thinking and stumbled out into the yard, gasping for air like she'd been drowning. The rain returned. It was sudden, immediate, as if the storm itself had been waiting for her to cross the threshold. The instant the drops began to fall, the pressure in the air lifted. Their breath was gone. Whatever had stood behind her, whatever had reached for the door, vanished. She collapsed onto the porch, soaked and shivering, heart pounding so hard she thought it might tear through her chest. But she was alive. For now. May did go back inside until morning. She sat curled on the porch swing for hours, watching the forest beyond the edge of the property and flinching at every sound. When daylight finally pushed the night away, she stood up, every muscle itching, and slowly walked back in. The living room was undisturbed, no broken furniture, no signs of forced entry. Everything looked exactly as it had before. But when she turned toward the couch, she saw the prints. 3 wet, distorted footprints led from the hallway to the back of the couch. Not bare feet, these were strange, elongated, the toes too long and thin, almost claw-like. The wood floor around them was completely dry except for those exact spots, as if whatever had made them was wet from the rain outside, but from something else. Something internal. The prints stopped just behind the couch, exactly where she had felt the breathing. She took photos, even tried to take a sample of the wet residue with a tissue, but it evaporated almost instantly, leaving no trace behind. Just the photo remained. A blurry shot that didn't do justice to the real horror standing where it had stood. That day she drove into town. She needed help, anyone who knew something. She walked into the diner, and ordered coffee just to have an excuse to sit and watch the locals. Their eyes shifted uncomfortably when they saw her. Just like before. After a few minutes, the waitress, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a kind smile, walked over and quietly placed a piece of paper next to Ma's coffee. On it was a phone number. Nothing else. All this, the woman said, barely audible. Someone who used to live there. Before Maya could ask anything, the woman turned and walked away. Maya left cash on the counter and went straight to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the number. Finally, she dialed it. It rang only once before someone answered. "I wondered when you'd call," the voice said. A man's voice, gravelly, hollow, like someone who had lived with grief for too long. May introduced herself and told him she was living in the farmhouse. There was a long pause on the other end. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he asked. The breathing, Maya whispered. "And the rain always stopping." Another pause. "And it comes in when the rain stops. That's the only time it can." but it doesn't stay outside. It's already inside you the moment you hear it breathe. That's when the real haunting begins. May didn't know how to respond. She just held the phone tighter. It'll get bolder now, the man continued. That breath, that's how it learns you. Through your fear. Every time you freeze, every time your heart pounds, it remembers. It's mapping you. What does it want? She asked. I never stayed long enough to find out, he said. But some don't leave. And when they stop fighting, it doesn't stop breathing. The call ended. That night, Maya sat in her bedroom with every light on, every door open, every curtain pulled back. She played recordings of rain on her phone, trying to trick her mind into thinking it never stopped. But when the real rain fell again, she knew the difference immediately. And like always, the rain stopped. The doorbell rattled again. But this time, she wasn't paralyzed. She stood up. She faced the door. And she heard it closer than ever. A breath, just on the other side of the door. As if it had leaned in, she pressed to the wood, listening to her heartbeat through the grain. After the phone call with the former tenant, something inside Maya shifted. It was the feeling of peace or understanding, far from it. It was a slow burning dread that settled in her chest like a second heartbeat. She now knew that whatever haunted the house was a figment of her imagination. It was real. And it had a pattern. The breathing. The scratches. The silence after the rain. But what terrified her most was the idea that it was learning her. Studying her. The thought that each night it stood just beyond her reach, mapping her fear, memorizing how she flinched, froze, and failed to act. That realization haunted her more than any ghost ever could. Determined to know the full truth, Maya decided to record everything. As she was losing her mind, she wanted proof. And if something truly was inside the house with her, then she needed to see it to face it. She set up her phone with a wide-angle lens and a tripod in the hallway facing her bedroom door. She activated night vision and hit record, placing her phone on airplane mode so nothing could interrupt it. She left it there when she went to bed, staring up at the ceiling, waiting. At night, the rain was heavier than usual, hammering the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. She tried to stay awake, but exhaustion from the last week finally caught up with her. Her eyelids grew heavy. Her thoughts drifted. And just before sleep took her, she heard the last drops of rain stop falling. The silence was so complete it rang in her ears. She awoke with the start of dawn. Her phone was still recording. The light outside was soft and gray, casting a sickly hue across her bedroom. She grabbed the phone with trembling hands and stopped the video, already afraid of what she might find. She sat on her bed, wrapped in a blanket, and began scrolling through the footage. At first, everything was normal. The first few hours showed nothing but the empty hallway bathed in night vision green. The digital timestamp crept forward minute. That's when it happened. The hallway grew darker. Not just from the night vision, it was like a shadow had swept across the lens itself. The temperature on the display thermometer dropped 2 degrees in an instant. And then from the far end of the hall, something moved. A figure stepped into view. It was tall, unnaturally tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long for its frame. It moved in unnatural, jerky motions, as if each movement had to be remembered before it was performed. Its skin was pale and damp, stretched tight over visible bone, and its face. Maya paused the video. Its face was like anything human. There were eyes sunken, black, and wide, as if peeled open too far. But there was no mouth at first. Just a blank stretch of skin, smooth and still. And then it tilted its head. A slow, deliberate motion. As it did, a seam appeared where a mouth should be thin, stretching slowly across its face like a gash opening up, as if the skin had to remember how to be a mouth. And then it opened. Wide. Too wide. The sound from the phone distorted instantly. What had been clean audio now filled with a deep, rumbling growl, guttural, and warped, like something was wrong with the recording itself. The creature leaned toward the bedroom door and pressed its face against the wood. The video caught every horrifying second of it, the way its hands, clawed and bony, dragged down the wall, leaving behind more of those familiar, deep scratches. It exhaled against the door. Not a knock. Not a bang. Just a long, deliberate breath that seemed to fog the air even in the infrared filter. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she watched. On screen, the thing pulled back, cocked its head again, and turned to face the camera. Straight into the lens. Straight at her. Its eyes, hollow and black, locked onto the viewer. The sound distorted again, this time louder, sharper, and more violent. Static erupted, The screen jittered, and for a brief half-second, the video glitched. When the picture returned, the creature was gone. The hallway was empty. Mess stared at the screen for several minutes. Frozen. She scrolled back, played it again. Watched the way it moved, the way it stared at the door. At her. And when it turned toward the camera, she realized something chilling. It had known. It knew she was watching. She exported the still frame of its face looking into the camera and studied it in the daylight. The eyes were the worst part. Not because they were monstrous, but because there was something behind them. Intelligence. Anger. A presence that couldn't be explained by superstition or myth. She did sleep the following night. She could. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face, that gaping mouth, those eyes. The breath on the door. She left the lights on, played music, and watched the footage over and over like it would change, like seeing it enough times would somehow make it more understandable. But it never did. She checked the hallway the next morning. The scratches were there. Scratch. Exactly where the thing had dragged its claws. There was no mistaking it. The footage and the physical evidence lined up perfectly. She wasn't hallucinating. She wasn't imagining it. It was real. And then something strange happened. She received an airdrop request on her phone. No name. No contact. Just a file titled Silence. She declined it immediately, her hands shaking. There was no one else around. No one nearby. She checked the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, anything that could connect to another device. Nothing. She was alone. But the request came again 5 minutes later. She accepted it this time. The file was a video. Different from her own footage, yet this was older, more degraded, like it had been copied dozens of times. It showed a room not unlike hers. A hallway familiar. A door. And then exactly, the same creature appeared, same twisted movements, same horrid mouth, same black, soulless eyes. But this time, the door opened. Slowly. Almost welcoming. And as it did, the creature stepped inside. The screen filled with static, and then cut to black. No screams. No sound. Just that blackness. May deleted the file, but it didn't matter. Something in her already knew what it meant. This had happened before. Others. They had tried to document it. They had tried to warn others. Maybe they thought proof would protect them. It did. She no longer trusted her phone, her cameras, or her recordings. Whatever this thing was, it was bound by rules, she understood. It could distort electronics, appear when it wanted. And worst of all, it was getting closer. Older. That night, she left the phone recording again, but she did watch the footage the next day. She didn't need to. She woke with her bedroom door slightly open. And on her nightstand, in the soft gray morning light, were 3 perfect scratches. The farmhouse was no longer a place may live, it had become a waiting room. A cold, quiet space between knowing and surrender. Each night built into the next, marked only by the rhythm of the rain, and the inevitable silence that followed. That ceased to be just a time on the clock, it had become a gate. When the rain stopped, the gate opened, and whatever was watching her from the other side took one step closer. She didn't talk to anyone anymore. The townspeople had grown even more distant, their eyes avoiding hers when she entered the market or passed them by. They recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same look others must have had before her, those who stayed too long, those who let the rain guide their dreams. When she asked the old man at the gas station what he knew, he just muttered, "It does stay behind. You know that now, don't you?" They did respond. She simply drove home and locked the doors, though locks no longer felt useful. The next rain came 2 nights later. She heard the soft patter against her windows, gentle as always, and it lulled her into a false sense of calm. But now she understood. The rain was not her enemy. It was her shield. It kept the silence at bay. The sound of the droplets was the only thing standing between her and the thing that came when everything else stopped. She didn't even try to sleep. She sat in the living room again, surrounded by salt lines she had poured across every doorway, every windowsill. She was religious, but she had read enough desperate forum threads, watched enough cursed footage, seen enough repeated symbols carved into old attic floorboards to know that salt might be her only barrier. The clock ticked, and she watched it approach the moment. She held her breath. The rain stopped. Instantly, like it had never existed. The room went quiet. Every bulb in the house dimmed at once, not a blackout, but a draining, like something was sucking the power from the walls. Her phone flickered, then went dead, despite being plugged in. The digital clock on the oven reset, the microwave blinked, and in the eerie hush, she heard it again. That breath. Closer than ever. It was inside the room this time. No door had opened. No creak of hinges. But the presence was undeniable, as thick as smoke, settling around her shoulders and seeping into her spine. Her eyes slowly scanned the room. She didn't see it at first, and then she realized it wasn't standing across from her anymore. It wasn't pacing the hallway or dragging its claws along the floor. It was behind her. She felt it. The warmth of something exhaling into her hair. The smell damp, earthy, and sickly sweet filled her nose. Her skin prickled, and every hair stood on end. She did dare turn around. Her body screamed for her to move, to scream, to run, but her soul understood the truth. It was there to chase her. It didn't need to. It had already caught her. The breath grew louder, longer, as if it were breathing through her now. Her vision blurred. She could feel her thoughts being tugged at, like threads being pulled loose from a tightly woven tapestry. It wasn't just in the room, it was inside her. Whispering things she couldn't fully hear, thoughts that did belong to her sliding into her mind like shadows slipping under a locked door. And then, just like always, the rain returned. A soft patter. And heavier. The lights flickered back to life. Her phone rebooted. The microwave blinked its usual numbers. But Maya didn't feel relief. She wasn't alone anymore. The next day, she felt different. Not just tired. Oh. She couldn't remember her dreams. Her memory was beginning to fray at the edges. Simple things like where she left her keys or what day it was slipped away like mist. She would look at her reflection in the mirror and pause. Just a second too long, like she expected someone else to be staring back. She started hearing the breath during the day. Soft at first. In the background of her thoughts. But growing. In the static of the television, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the quiet spaces between words when she tried to speak. It had threaded itself into the corners of her life, no longer waiting for the rain to stop. One morning, she drove into town, hoping to see people, hear normal voices, feel the comfort of other lives moving forward. But the town felt different. The sky above was gray, yet there was no rain. The wind was still. She walked past the grocery store. It was closed. The lights were off. The diner's door was locked, chairs stacked on the tables. No sound. No birds. No cars. Not even the buzzing of insects. She checked her phone. No signal. It was as if the entire world had been paused just for her. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. The silence pressed against her chest. Then, from behind her, she heard the doorbell of her car rattle. Not violently. Gently. Deliberately. She ran. That night, she tried something different. She lit candles, read aloud from the journal she found in the attic, repeating old Latin prayers that had been scrawled in shaking hands on the last few pages. Her voice trembled as she chanted, as the rain began again outside, as the house waited for its moment. But the ritual didn't help. At Ameth the rain stopped. And she felt the breath again, but this time, it wasn't on her skin. It was in her lungs. Her chest convulsed. She gasped, but the air did feel like her own. Her body moved, but not by her will. Her fingers twitched as if someone else were trying to use them. She stumbled backward, coughing violently, and something came upon her mouthful of water. Cold, dark water, like rain that had never touched the earth. She felt her knees gagging. When she looked up, the creature was standing in the doorway. But it was the same. Its form had changed. It looked more like her now. Same height. Same build. The face was perfect, but it was closed. Like a mask sculpted from memory and nightmare. The mouth was still wrong, still too wide, still full of black, but the eyes were hers. Almost. Too much. It tilted its head, mimicking her. And it whispered not aloud, but inside her skull. You're mine when the rain ends. The rain resumed. And the thing vanished again, dissolving into the mist of the returning storm. But it had left something behind. In the mirror that morning, Maya saw the scratches. Not on the wall. On her. 3 faint lines along her ribs, as if drawn gently, lovingly, in the night. That day the rain did come. It was the first completely dry day since she'd arrived. And yet at them, the silence came anyway. The rules were gone. The house was gone. The rain was no longer needed. May no longer remembered when she last felt safe. The house, the rain, the silence, everything had dissolved into a dreamlike cycle where night and day blurred and reality no longer held its edges. She had stopped counting the scratches. They were everywhere now, on the floor, the ceiling, the inside of the fridge, even the skin behind her ears. 3 marks, every time. She stopped documenting them, stopped looking for patterns. Because the pattern had changed. It wasn't just coming for her in the dark anymore. It was always there. The rain didn't fall anymore, not in the way it used to. Sometimes it would start in the middle of the day, even when the sun was shining. Other times, it would fall upward against her windows. Once, she stood in the backyard and watched it pour only around her, circling her like a barrier she could never escape. At night, she no longer heard the breath because she no longer needed to. It was her breath now. What? Too loud in the stillness. She had tried to leave the house twice. The first time, her car wouldn't start. The second time, the road behind her stretched longer with every mile until she circled back to the same gravel path, the same porch, the same front door. She realized she had spoken out loud in days. Her voice felt distant, unused, like it didn't belong to her anymore. She tried to say her name in the mirror, but the sound didn't come out right. Like someone else was trying to speak through her. Like her own mouth didn't remember how to form the syllables. She kept seeing her reflection in places she had stood. In windows behind her. In polished doorknobs. In the blackness of the unplugged screen. Always her but slightly wrong. A smile that was half a second late. A blink that didn't match her own. A set of eyes watching her with the calm patience of something that had already won. One morning, she found her own handwriting scrawled across a wall in the attic she had never written on before. It was ink. It was paint. It was written in something darker, dried and flaky. The message was simple. You were chosen because you listened. She did remember writing it. But she knew it was true. She had listened to the silence. She had let it in. Even when her instinct screamed at her to run, she stayed. She stayed because she wanted to understand it. And now she did. It had never been about the rain. The rain had just been the lullaby, soft noise to distract her while something ancient and patient crept closer. It used to sound like a cage, like curtains before a stage. And when the performance began, when the rain stopped, it revealed itself not to scare her but to join her. Maya was no longer sure she was alone in her skin. Her dreams weren't dreams anymore. There were places, wet, dark places that felt more real than her house. Long hallways with doors that bulged. Rooms that whispered. A forest of black trees that breathed and twisted and led nowhere. She walked through these places now, barefoot, silent, with something just behind her. Always just behind her, breathing in unison with her. One morning, she woke to find every mirror in the house shattered except one. The bathroom mirror. In it her face was half shadow, one eye darker than the other. Not bruised, not injured. Just changed. She smiled at her reflection. And it smiled back. Just a fraction too late. That day, she went into town again. But the town was empty. Every shop was abandoned. Doors open. Wires playing static. A newspaper fluttered past her on the wind, soaked and unreadable. The date was months old. She saw herself in the diner window. Not a reflection. She was standing inside, staring out. Her own face. Same clothes. Same posture. But she was moving. Just watching. Made it approach. She turned and walked back to the car. But the road had vanished. The fields beyond town had been replaced by fog that pulsed like a living thing. So she walked. Back to the house. Back to the rain that no longer fell. She stopped choosing lights. She stopped closing doors. She let the dark into every room. And every night, the silence didn't wait for the clock anymore. It came when it wanted. And when it did, Maya would sit perfectly still, listening, eyes wide and calm, until she felt the breath inside her chest echoing back to something unseen. She began to write again, not in journals, not on paper, but on the walls, the floorboards, even the windows. Strange symbols that did come from any language she recognized, but which flowed from her hands like they'd been waiting for years. She would wait to find them glowing faintly in the dark, pulsing like heartbeats. Then the rain returned. Not outside. Inside. It started dripping from the ceiling. From the corners of her room. From the backs of her hands. Cold and black and endless. She did wipe it away. She let it soak into her clothes, her bed, the walls. She lay down one night in the center of the living room. The house was quiet. Her body was tired. But she felt no fear. Only a strange relief. She knew the rules now. She knew the silence. And when the rain stopped this time, she didn't move. She smiled, closed her eyes, and something leaned in close, so close she could feel its breath pass through her. And then finally, it breathed her.